Hello, welcome back to Steins Gate Zero. I am now doing Gehenna Stigma. That is a scary name for a chapter. Fubuki was at a different location than before. This time it was the AH Tokyo General Hospital High-Tech Medical Center in Yoyogi. It was supposedly one of Japan's most advanced hospitals. According to what I read on the internet, patients with the new encephalitis that everyone was talking about were being gathered here for special treatment. But I'd also read lots of really bad urban legends about the place, and I was a bit worried about what kind of horror show I'd find there. But of course, when we arrived, it was nothing like that. It was very clean and decorated like a luxury hotel. Kaede and Yuki waved to us as we entered the lobby. Yuki had gotten a message from Kaede as well and had evidently come right over. Yuki gave Mayuri a soft hug and a smile. Kaede bowed her head apologetically. Mayuri looked extremely relieved as Yuki continued to hug her. If I remembered right, the last time they examined her, they said it was possible she had the disease, but as long as it didn't get worse, it wouldn't affect her daily life. They just told her to come back for regular checkups. The new encephalitis had arrived in Japan over 6 months ago, but the number of patients was still increasing. Fortunately, there hadn't been a single casualty yet. I was certain that what they were calling encephalitis was actually something similar to Reading Steiner. One time when I went to visit Fubuki in the hospital, I had secretly investigated the other patients. I wasn't able to get any proof, but I found out most of the patients in our wing had, to varying degrees, memories of the same world line. Many people had memories of Japan at war. Kaede motioned to Mayuri, indicating she should sit down at a nearby sofa. I let the girls sit down on the sofa and stood next to them while I surveyed the lobby. I wasn't sure how I felt about that, if I was right about what this disease really was. It was hard to imagine a bigger waste of money. Across the lobby, I saw an old Japanese doctor in a white coat and a big man in a suit who was frantically trying to talk to him. I'd seen the man in the suit before. Actually, it was a man I knew well.
教授レスキネン教授
I hurried over.
レスキネン教授俺です岡部です
He must have been wearing his translator because he was communicating with the old doctor in Japanese. Dr. Eskinen's face quickly broke into a smile when he saw me. His voice was so loud that everyone in the lobby, doctors, nurses, staff, and even the patients, turned to look at me. But Dr. Eskinen didn't seem to notice them as he ran over. He was like a giant American football player racing for a touchdown.
ちょっと待ってください教授ストップストップ
My cries went unheard as Dr. Eskinen tackled me and then pulled me up. Then he switched from football player to pro wrestler and he swung me up and down. I felt like I was a little child. There was nothing I could do to resist him as he flung me around. A moment later, he noticed the cold stares of the people around us and finally released me. Oh, good to see you. Dr. Eskinen bowed to the people around him in apology. The doctor that Professor Eskinen had been talking to was staring at me suspiciously.
その
I wasn't sure exactly what to tell him. It wasn't like he was really my professor.
見たところまだ学生のようだが、どこの大学かね。教授と同じ脳科学専攻だとすると。
いえ俺は
彼は9月からビクトゥコンドリア大学の学生ですよ。いずれ私の研究室に来てもらうつもりでいます。
おほう、ビクトルコンドリア大学かね。これは驚いた。
I looked over at Dr. Eskinen questioningly, but he just gave me a mischievous smile. This guy. He really was such a kid.
日本人であそこへ行ける学生なんてめったにいない。大したものだ。
どうも
After the doctor left, I sighed loudly enough for Professor Eskinen to hear me.
今の人は
この病院の院長だよ。
院長そんな偉い人相手に堂々と嘘をついたんですか
おや、私は嘘なんてついたかな。確かに9月から我が校の学生とは言ったが、何も今年の9月からとは言ってないよ。それとも何かい？君は結局我が校に来る自信がないのかな。だったら少し残念だが。
He was like a little kid, completely shameless. But still, it was hard to hate him.
でも驚きました。まさか教授がまた日本に来ているなんて。
It had been 5 months since I'd seen him off at Narita.
魔法も一緒に来ているよ。
そうなんですか。一言も教えてもらってませんが。
I talked to her often via email and video chat, mostly about Amadeus' testing, but she hadn't said a word about coming to Japan. I hadn't heard anything about it from Kurisu either.
また和光市の部署のオフィスだよ。クリスと一緒にいつでも遊びに来るといい。泥棒に入られるから別の場所にしてくれと訴えたんだがね。
Okay. Dr. Eskinen looked up toward the ceiling and shrugged. It did feel like that place had security issues.
ウィンタールはどこか具合でも悪いのかい？治療でここに？
いえ、違います。入院してる友人の見舞いで。
ああ、そうか。それはよか。いや、その友人にとっては良くないか。申し訳ない。
いえ。それで教授こそ日本の病院で何を？
Dr. Eskinen brought his face close to mine and whispered so that the people around us couldn't hear him.
君も知っているだろう。例の新型脳炎の件だよ。アメリカ政府の依頼で精神生理学研究所が治療法を研究していたんだが、手詰まりらしくてね。私も調査に加わるよう大学から命じられたというわけさ。
そうなんですか。レスキネン教授が新型脳炎を。
Now there was a word I didn't expect to hear. I explained that my friend was here because they thought she might have the disease.
もしかしてその友人というのは中瀬克美？
ああ、クリスマスパーティーで会ってましたね。
うんうん。実は私が新型農園に興味を持ったのもあのパーティーがきっかけでね。君と克美が揃って倒れただろ？
He was right, actually. In my case, I'd been sent to that other world
克
line.
美には何日か前に再会したんだけどね。私にも何度か噛みついてきたよ。どうしてまた入院させられるんだ？私は元気なのにってね。
そうでしたか。
もう少し協力的になってくれると嬉しいと凛太郎からも伝えておいてくれないかい？
はあ。
実際のところキャツミだけでなく全ての患者に申し訳ないという気持ちはあるんだ。我々も日本の医師団も研究を進めてはいるんだけどね。どうにも解せない検査結果ばかりで困り果てているのさ。
Dr. Luskin's usually chipper expression darkened. The man was such a ball of vitality that I hadn't noticed until then. Well, his smile disappeared. I could see the wrinkles that had formed on his face from exhaustion. He must have been working hard, like he said. Oh, that was long. That was long.
どうしたんだよ、ウィンターロ。
その
何か気になることでも？
いえ、俺は医学生じゃないのでさっぱりです。
I was just about to tell him about my Reading Steiner, but in the end, I couldn't. If my uniformed opinion was wrong, it could cost the encephalitis patients their lives. I couldn't just tell them when I didn't have any proof. And then his face drew close to mine again.
ところで、その克美がなかなか興味深いことを言っていたんだよ。自分たちは病気じゃない。別の世界の出来事を夢で見る能力があるだけだとかなんとか。
I told her not to say anything about it. Could she not help it? This was bad. They might start to doubt her sanity.
中瀬さんはそのとても想像力がたくましいというか SF とかアニメとか大好きですから、他の平行世界を感知できる力なんて多分趣味の影響で口にしただけじゃないかと思います。実は俺もそういうことを言っていた時期があるんですよ。
This is what she's going through now. I tried my best to come up with excuses, but Dr. Luskin still seemed
だけど
concerned.
ね、私も治療プロジェクトに参加して驚いたんだが、確かにこの病の特徴として多くの患者が夢を共有する不可思議な現象が起こっているんだ。集団幻覚に近いのかとも思って今調べているんだけどね。でもなんだろう、こんなことは初めてでね。脳科学的には今のところ解が導けない。正直非科学的という言葉が
You're not gonna know a lot about it right now.
それこそ平行世界とか前世の記憶とかね。
I'll probably know more about it later.
君も克美からいろいろと話を聞いてくれると助かるよ。医者に言えないことでも友人になら話すだろうしね。
はい、一応心がけておきます。
さて、リンタロウ、それはそれとして確認だ。
Dr. Leskinen was looking over my
クリスマ
shoulder.
スパーティーの時にも感じたんだけれど、君のガールフレンドたちはキュートなお嬢さんばかりだね。
え
I turned around and saw that Mayuri, Kaede, and Yuki had all stood up from the sofa and were looking at me. When they saw Dr. Leskinen was looking at them, they waved.
やはりあの中に恋人がいたりするのかい？ユキ、カエデ、マユリ、ルカ、それとも
I mean, like, the two of them have been involved before. His words were so surprising I couldn't think of anything to say. Maho would often call this middle-aged man a mischievous boy, and that was exactly the look he had on his face. He did get involved with Luca, even though he's a guy. Dr. Uskinen turned to walk away before I could figure out what he meant.
私はもうちょっと院長と話をしないといけないからこれでできればユキたちにも一人一人発揮していきたいところだったが次回にとっておこう彼女たちによろしく
はい
Mary and the others came over to me as I watched him go.
今の人
Okay.
レスキネン先生ですよね。どこかで見たことあると思った。アメリカに帰ったんじゃなかったでしたっけ？おかり？
There was no way I could tell the girls what Dr. Uskinen and I were just talking about. After Fubuki's exam was over, we went to her room and listened to her complain, and then the visit was over. Just like Dr. Uskinen had said, she looked just fine. She told us she was ready to leave the hospital and jog all the way home. Mayuri and the others were relieved, but I felt worried. Did I need to talk to Dr. Uskinen about Reading Steiner after all? But how would I explain it? It might be a better idea to talk to Maho and have her explain it to him. I couldn't come up to an answer right away. It was a very hot day in 1998 when Suzuha said goodbye to Kagari Shiina. She'd gone to get food and water from a local store, and when she'd come back and opened the hatch, Kagari was inside screaming. She looked inside and saw that Kagari was slamming her tiny hands down on the control console.
お前、何をしてるんだ?
Kagari shrank back when she saw Suzuha.
違うの。これは、その。答えろ。だって目を覚ましたら鈴葉お姉ちゃんがいなくて真っ暗で明かりもつかないし狭くて怖くて苦しくてだからかがりドアを開けたくてそれであちこちいじってるうちにこんなことに
Kagari started to cry.
ごめんなさい鈴葉お姉ちゃんごめんなさいでも本当に怖かったんだだからそうか
Suzuha relaxed her guard. Kagari had PTSD from her time as a war orphan, and she hadn't fully recovered yet. Mayuri had once told her that she got very frightened in dark and cramped places. It would make sense if waking up in the dark caused a panic attack, and the time machine could only function with Suzuha's biometric authorization. Someone of Kagari's size wouldn't be able to break the console either.
お前は時間移動のショックで気を失ってたんだよ。だから休ませておいたんだけど、悪かった。
Suzuha grabbed one of Kagari's tiny hands to help her up, and then led her outside the machine.
暑い。かがり、約束するんだ。どんなことがあっても操縦席のスイッチに触ったりするな。いいな。じゃあ、私は仕事にかかるから、お前はその辺で休んでるんだ。飲み物と食べ物は適当に食べていい。
Suzuha handed Kagari the provisions she'd bought, then went inside and poked her head into the cargo space under the control console. She connected the IBM 5100 she'd stored there to a portable terminal she'd brought from the future. By all appearances, it was an early 2000s cell phone, but inside it was a miniaturized quantum computer from the year 2036. Of course, future Dar had made it himself. When she booted up the IBM 5100, rows of numbers started to appear on the screen.
何をするの?
Kagari was looking in from outside the machine.
2000年問題は勉強したか? 施設の学校でちょっとだけ。結局何にも起こらなかったんでしょ? 表向きはね。 公表されてないけど、実は当時あれのせいでいくつかの地域や国に深刻な問題が起きたんだ。そうなの？問題だったのはこの IBN5100 というコンピューターなんだよ。これには古いプログラム言語が搭載されてるんだけど、そのプログラムの問題点を技術者たちが修正できなかったというより、そんな言語で書かれた重大なプログラムが存在すること自体全く知られてなかった。第三次世界大戦はタイムマシンの開発競争が発端なんだけど、もしかすると2000年問題で発生したある事象とそれに付随する対立こそがもっと深い原因である可能性がある。
She didn't expect a 10-year-old like Kagari to understand this, but she didn't feel like taking the time to explain.
しかも西暦2000年というのは特殊な年でね、全ての世界線が一旦一つに収束してしまうらしいんだ。それに関連してこの問題があらゆる世界線の因果に重大な影響を引き起こすかもしれない。私たちが目指してる狭間の世界線、シュタインズゲートも例外じゃない。
She looked down at the terminal connected to the IBN 5100.
だからこれは2000年問題を起こさないようにするための修正プログラムなんだよ。
Right now, the terminal was converting the patch into the language used by the IBM 5100. The next step was to spread this program all around the world in the form of a virus. In the year 2000, problems that this era's engineers missed would completely disappear. The word connect appeared on the terminal subscreen.
OK、 つながった。
She'd been told that in Japan in this era, ADSL was still in the test phase, and most normal users connected to the internet by low-speed dial-up using ISDN. But in major city areas like Akihabara, universities, labs, and some big computer companies were starting to use fiber optic broadband. Some of them were even using wireless LANs. Suzuha cracked her way into one of those. Dad had laughed when he'd said that with 2036 technology, cracking late 20th century network security was a joke, but he'd been right.
でも未来を変えちゃったらカガリたちがいた未来の世界も
That's a lot of high-tech technology.
変わっちゃうんじゃないの？
Surprisingly, Kagari had gotten the gist of what Suzuha had just told her.
そういうことだ。もうあの世界は存在させない。私たちはシュタインズゲートを目指すためにここへ来たんだから。
Suddenly, the uneasy look on Kagari's face vanished. It was as if her soul had left its body. Suddenly, her face was expressionless and her eyes were wide.
声、神様の声、聞こえる。カガリ？ダメだよ。よくないよ。ダメなんだよ、鈴葉お姉ちゃん。そんなことしちゃいけないんだ。おい。
Kagari was acting strangely. Suspiciously, Suzuha reached her hand out towards her, but she slipped past Suzuha's hand, and quicker than any child should be able to move, she slammed her shoulder straight into Suzuha's body. Suzuha was caught completely off guard. That's how fast it was. Kagari's shoulder hit her in the solar plexus. She bent over and collapsed onto the seat. Kagari tore the terminal out of Suzuha's hands. The cables connecting it to the IBM 5100 were ripped out, and errors displayed on both screens. What is happening? Kagari didn't answer the question. Instead, she grabbed the black backpack that Suzuha placed on the seat and spilled its contents onto the floor. There were MRE's spare parts, clothes, and a semi-automatic pistol. Suzuha couldn't believe it. Kagari was going to try and pick it up. She forced herself to ignore the pain as she jumped on Kagari's body. But another unbelievably powerful body slam knocked her back. Why are you doing this? Something cold was pushed right up against her brow. Kagari's tiny hands weren't shaking at all as they clutched the semi-automatic pistol. In the space of an instant, the safety on the gun had been flipped off. That's when Suzuha realized that this wasn't just a temper tantrum. Suzuha was the one who taught her how to use a gun. That's why she knew that Kagari was perfectly calm.
今すぐ銃を下ろせ。こんな真似はやめろ。やめるのはお姉ちゃんの方だよ。何？世界を変えちゃいけないんだ。お姉ちゃんはおかしいこと言ってる。
There was no hesitation in her eyes. Instead, Suzuha saw only resolve.
じゃあこのまま戦争が起きてもいいっていうのか。そんなのわかんないよ。かがりは元の世界に戻りたいだけだもん。ならもう無理だ。私たちはタイムマシンですでに過去に干渉してる。世界線だってずれてしまってるはずだ。あそこに戻れる可能性は低く。うるさいうるさいうるさい。かがりはママを絶対に助けるんだ。この世界を消すなんてダメだよ。絶対にやらせないから。
Kagari turned the gun towards the IBN 5100.
やめろ。
Why? What will this solve? Before Suzuha could stop her, she yanked down on the trigger. Again and again.
やめてくれ、かがり。やめろ。
And then Kagari jumped out of the time machine, and Suzuha never saw her again. On every night that passed, she remembered Kagari. Suzuha had spent some time looking for Kagari when she'd first come to this era, and she never found anything. But Kagari Shiina, who was now 22 years old, was here in Akihabara. Suzuha was sure of it, but it did no good to keep thinking about it. So Suzuha decided to stop thinking and look around the room. Itaru, her dad, was playing yet another game populated entirely with female characters. His jaw was slack, and he was scratching the belly fat that stuck out from under his shirt as he played. There wasn't much to respect in him right now, either as a father or as a person.
そういえば、母さんとはうまくやれてる？大丈夫？私が生まれてこなくなるような事態にならないよね。
なんつうの？タイムマシンよりもなんだい？
ちょっと。
Suzuha stormed over to Itaru.
困るよ、坊さん。
うん。パパ、頑張るからね。
いっつも口ばっかり。結局、例の映画のチケットも無駄にしちゃったんでしょ？
She meant the pair of movie tickets that Mayuri and Ferris had conspired to give them at the Christmas party.
あれはさ、オカリンと吹雪氏が倒れちゃったじゃん。その後、お見舞いとかでバタバタしてるうちに映画が終わっちゃってたわけで、しょうがないっつうか。
でもその後、新しいチケットを用意しようとしたら断ったって聞いたけど。
誰に？
まゆ姉さんとルミ姉さんに決まってるじゃないか。
そりゃあれだ。マユシとフェイリスタに頼りきりなんて男らしくないっしょ。キリ。で？自分で何か行動に移したわけ？ダメだこれ。
Maybe this was a more important problem than the time machine. Suzuha brought her hands up to her head.
いい父さん。私、いつまでもこうやってお説教できないんだからね。もうすぐ行っちゃうんだよ。
Suddenly, there was a sad look in Itaru's eyes.
そういう顔しない。約束したはずだよ。もう迷うのはやめにしようって。
For the past 6 months, Suzuha had been thinking about whether it was really right to erase this world. But in the end, it was none other than Itaru who pushed her to go ahead.
ごめん。
She couldn't bear to see her father so depressed, so she patted his broad back.
しょぼくれてないで、母さんにメールして。予定の空いてる日がないか聞いて。で、空いてたら映画に誘う。
いきなりハードル高すぎ。
高すぎでも何でもいいから誘いなさい。いい？これは命令だからね。
命令って？
返事は？
さあ、イエスさ。
Satisfied, she headed off to take a shower.
でもその前にちょっとだけコンビニに行ってくる。にらまないで。なるべく太らないようなものを食べますんで、何卒お許しを。
バニラ。
はい。
私、シャワー出たらアイス食べたい。バニラ。
わかった。 庶民がなかなか口にできない高級なやつをいっぱい買ってきてあげる。
いっぱいはいらないよ。一つでいい。
さあ、イエス。
That was enough to cheer Taro up. He took his wallet and ran out of the lab.
やれやれ。世話がかかるんだから。
She had just about taken off her jacket so she could take that shower, but
Suzuha!
Yutaro had come back into the lab.
どうかした？
階段のところにさ、こんなの落ちてたんだよね。
Yutaro showed her a keychain he was holding. It was a round anime character whose color had faded to a smoky green. It was an Upa.
誰のかわかる？
まゆ姉さんじゃないの？
She leaned forward to take a closer look, and then felt like she was experiencing deja vu.
このウーパー、どこかで。
She'd seen it before. She couldn't really remember when, but her internal alarms were going off. This keychain was extremely important. Upas were common enough that you could find them anywhere. The plastic edges had worn down, the paint was faded and coming off in places. But there was no dust and there were no stains. Instead, it shone brightly, as if its owner had put a lot of effort into taking good care of it. The chain was so old that part of it had snapped off. That was probably how it got dropped.
どこだっただろう。どこかで見た。
マユシに見せてもらったとか？
そうなのかな。
She stared at the green Upa in Itaru's hands, and then, in her mind, she heard a young girl scream.
ママがずっと大切にしてきたウーパのキーホルダーだよ。かがりちゃんにあげる。大事にしてね。
She gasped. A feeling of indescribable terror raced down her spine.
まさかこれかがりのか。
That was when she'd last seen it, August 13th, 2036, the day she'd gone into the time machine. That's when she'd seen this Upa. It was older and more worn now, but the more she remembered that day, the more certain she became this was the Upa that Mayuri had given to Kagari. She'd seen Kagari holding it and crying to herself many times before.
かがりってもしかして未来のマユシの娘？見つかったん？
いや、でも向こうはこっちを認識しているんだ。
つまりどういうことだってばよ。
あいつこのラボを監視してるんだよ。
Satisfied, she headed off to take a shower. Ever since then, her careful efforts to defend the time machine had paid off, and she hadn't seen any sign of Kagari, but she never thought she'd be watching the lab.
いや、ちょっと考えれば当たり前のことだったんだ。あいつは私たちがシュタインズゲートに到達するのを阻止しようとしてる。この世界をなかったことにしたくないと思ってる。ということは私だけじゃなく父さんもマークされてる。
え？僕？
まあ父さんの命に危険はないとは思うんだ。世界線の摂理を信じるなら父さんは少なくとも2036年までは生きるはずだし、ただシュタインズゲート到達を阻止するために父さんの研究の邪魔はしてくるかもしれない。
A lot of bad things had been happening around Suzuha, Itaru, and Rintaro Okabe. There was some possibility that the final target was
こ
Itaru.
れからは用心のために私がいない時には必ずドアに鍵をかけておいて。
わかった。
オカリンおじさんや
Wait,
母さん
Kagari's trying to
マ
stop
ユ姉さ
them
んたちが
now.
一緒にいても絶対に開けっぱなしはダメだよ。気休めかもしれないけどドアチェーンもかけた方がいい。
でもさ、オカリンやマユシならともかくアマネシと二人きりの時にそんなことしたらなんか別の意味で怪しくね？アマネシに変な誤解されないかな？
それは確かに。
もしそれで嫌われでもしたら我が家のピンチだお。
Suzuha groaned softly, unsure of what to do.
父さんがもっと早く母さんと恋人になってれば何の問題もないのに。
で、結局そこへ話が戻るとか？
とにかく注意だけはしておいてよね。
Suzuha decided to keep the green Upa keychain. She softly ran her fingertips over it as she stared at it.
なあ鈴葉、かがりたんって血はつながってないけどマユシの娘なんだよね。
そうだよ。
あのマユシに育ててもらった子が人を襲うような恐ろしい人間になるのかな。なんか鈴葉の話とイメージが重ならないっつうか、もっと優しくてホワホワしてて可愛い女の子になってるんじゃないかなとか思ったり。
だとよかったんだけど、私も前はそうなると信じてたけど、今のかがりは多分。
From what she'd seen at the radio building, she could tell Kagari definitely received professional combat training. It wasn't just the simple self-defense techniques that she'd learned from Suzuha when she was a child. As she'd grown up, she'd been taught the cold techniques of a killer. There was no way to know where she'd been, or what she'd been doing, ever since she'd gone missing in 1998. But there was no doubt in Suzuha's mind that she was trying to ruin her plans. Suzuha sighed as she took her shower. Since it was summer, she'd set the water temperature low. It was barely any hotter than tap water. As long as the water was pouring down on her, she could feel like all the bad memories were being washed away. She slapped her cheeks with both hands and turned off the water. The small tiled room suddenly became quiet. In the silence, she vigorously toweled off her hair. This building was never intended for anyone to live in. Not only was there very little room, there wasn't even a place to change. It was small and there were no windows, and the steam from the shower room built up, making it an unpleasant sauna in summer. Supposedly, Itaru and Okabe would sit naked next to the fans to get away from the heat and moisture. Of course, that was only when the girls, as well as Luka and Urashibara, weren't around. But Suzuha couldn't do that. There were those huge scars on her chest. If she was careless and Yuki saw them, she'd have a big problem. So she always forced herself to change within this small space. The second she left the shower room, she realized something was wrong. The lights were off in the part behind the curtain where the lab room was. She was sure she had left all the lab lights on when she'd gone to take a shower. She didn't remember turning them off. Still completely naked, she flung open the curtain. Weird. She dropped to the floor, ready to move. She could tell by the light from the shower room that there was no one else there. She didn't hear any breathing, and she didn't feel any other presence.
父さんが一度戻ってきたのか。
And then when he left, he turned off the lights. No, that couldn't be right. She looked around the room and saw that things had been moved in a way that an amateur wouldn't be able to notice. Itaru's computer desk, the sofa area, the bookshelves, even the mini kitchen. Someone had gone through them all. From the look of it, the same was probably true of the development room. Suzuha glanced over all the areas where she kept her guns. The closest was the sofa that she used as a bed. She wanted to have one easily available if she was attacked while she slept, so she had cut out the back of one of the sofa cushions and hidden a suppressed semi-automatic pistol in it. It was just a .32 caliber for self-defense, so it wouldn't do much damage unless you had good aim, but it was small and relatively quiet, which made it the best choice for a place like this. Suzuha tensed all of her muscles, coiling like a spring, and slowly moved towards the sofa without making a sound. As she did, she tried to notice any changes in the surrounding area. There was a small sound in the development room. There was a tiny, tiny creaking of the floor, to which you'd usually pay no mind. But that was more than enough for Suzuha. In an instant, she moved from quiet to action. She cleared the distance to the sofa in an instant and quickly drew her gun. She held it ready and slipped into the shadow of the refrigerator. From this position, she could barely see into the development room. The room became silent again. So who is that? But this time the intruder in the other room didn't try to hide her presence.
おかしな真似をしたら撃つ。 手を頭の上に。そのままゆっくり出てこい。
Suzuha threatened the intruder in a low voice, but the intruder seemed completely unconcerned as they exposed themselves to Suzuha's gaze.
この暑いのによくそんな格好をしていられるな。ヘルメットだけでも取ったらどうだ。
Kagari? The intruder was wearing a motorcycle suit just like before. Even the helmet was the same. The leather suit clung tight to their skin, revealing a voluptuous and perfectly proportioned body. It was clearly a woman.
あんたが探してるものだけどね。そこにはないよ。私の服のポケットだ。
Suzuha pointed toward the entrance to the shower room. The shirt she'd just taken off was lying there on the floor. The girl in the motorcycle suit turned her head, but because the face mask was down, Suzuha couldn't read her expression.
なあ、落としたらダメじゃないか。ママからもらった大切なものだろう、カガリ。
The second she spoke, Kagari Shiina was the first to move. She drew a deglass military knife that she must have been hiding behind her back and closed the gap between herself and Suzuha in an instant. Suzuha pointed the gun at her legs and pulled the trigger, carefully aiming away from her vitals. She heard the small pop of a suppressed .32 and saw Kagari lose her balance and fall. Or she thought she did, but it was a feint. She'd only pretended to lose her balance. In fact, she changed directions and was heading for the shower room. It seemed her first goal was to get what she'd come for. After firing only one shot, Suzuha realized even a .32 should have more recoil than this. She fired again, but Kagari didn't flinch even for a moment. At some point, all the bullets in Suzuha's gun had been swapped with blanks. That instant's panic was all it took. Kagari reached out for the shirt on the floor in front of the shower room. Suzuha gave up on firing and flung the gun at Kagari. There was a dull thud as the hard barrel slammed into her neck. Caught off balance, she staggered before she could grab the shirt. She could hear Kagari's voice for the first time from within the helmet. Suzuha jumped. She kicked the off-balance Kagari as hard as she could with her toned, muscled legs. This was no time to hold back. Kagari went flying all the way to the edge of the room. That had to have broken a few ribs. Suzuha jumped toward her to continue her attack. But with terrifying speed, Kagari leapt off the ground and charged at Suzuha. There wasn't enough time to come to a full stop. A sharp blade swept by, mere centimeters from her exposed abdomen. If she pulled back even a few tenths of a second later, that knife would have fatally sliced open her gut. The blood rushed to Suzuha's head. Kagari was serious. She was planning to kill her. There was no hesitation in her movements. Suzuha leaped back and searched for something she could use as a weapon. But the other guns were probably no different. There was a good chance they all had their ammo swapped with blanks too. It was even possible that all her self-defense knives had been taken too. Which left? There were several knives carefully stored in the kitchen. Yuki had brought them over to use in teaching the other girls how to cook. But Kagari had evidently noticed them as well, and she was moving to keep Suzuha from reaching them.
ずいぶん離れしてるじゃないか。とてもマシンの中でベソベソ泣いてた子供とは思えないな。驚いたよ。
Suzuha kept her distance from Kagari as she slowly moved along the wall. Her competitive drive burned even brighter as she tried to come up with a way to overcome her disadvantage.
ほら、カガリ、これだろ。
She picked up her shirt from in front of the shower room and took the green keychain out of its pockets.
どうした？取りに来なよ。
Her fingers moved as if to crush it. She could see Kagari twitch. For the first time, she could detect a hint of emotion beyond the helmet. Whoa. In an instant, she threw it at Kagari's stomach. The keychain flew in a slow arc, like she was tossing it to a friend. If something they loved was thrown like that, even the fiercest warrior would instinctively reach out both hands to grab it. Kagari was no exception. She carefully held her mother's memento in both her empty left hand and the right hand that still clutched the knife. Using the slow arc of the keychain as camouflage, Suzuha ran at her in a straight line. Her right fist connected hard with Kagari's stomach. Then her left arm smashed Kagari's head to the side. Kagari's body fell to the ground, her right shoulder taking the brunt of the fall. Suzuha could hear the sound of her joint dislocating. The knife slipped from her grasp. Suzuha got behind her and mounted her, twisting her right arm mercilessly. At the same time, she slipped her own left arm around Kagari's neck and squeezed hard. She could hear something like a moan from Kagari's throat. She could both hear and feel the bones in her arm and neck creaking. But Kagari picked up the knife on the floor with her left hand and once again tried to use it on Suzuha. Suzuha was forced to squeeze her arm and neck even harder. But Kagari didn't stop. If anything, she tried even harder to pull Suzuha away. Even in all the battles she'd been in, this much pressure on two different spots was enough to get even the toughest soldier to submit or fall unconscious. Terrified, Suzuha squeezed even harder. At this rate, she wouldn't simply knock her out. She really would kill Kagari. But if she stopped, Kagari would kill her. What should she do? Why does Kagari think this is what she has to do? And then she heard a sad, weak voice from inside the helmet. It startled her, and she relaxed both her arms. But that was just what Kagari had hoped for. The knife came very close to cutting Suzuha's left arm. When she let go to dodge it, Kagari shook her off and kicked at her hips with both legs. Suzuha was slammed back hard into the computer desk, and for a moment she couldn't breathe. She fell to the floor, and the printer and monitor crashed mercilessly into her naked body. Why, Kagari? Why? She forced herself to stand up, gasping hard as she did so. Kagari's breathing was heavy too. Her right arm was pointed in an impossible direction and hanging limp. She wouldn't be able to use it for a while, probably. But her left arm was still holding the knife. Suzuha glared at Kagari's face, not that she could see what it looked like behind that helmet. The two of them fell silent as they tried to catch their breath. The tension in the air was so thick that it was difficult to move a muscle. Sweat rolled down her forehead and into her eyes, but she still didn't blink as she waited for Kagari to make her next move. It was the sound of the front door opening that broke their stalemate. Suzuha felt a chill run down her spine when she heard Itaru's voice. She yelled at the exact same instant he turned on the lights. The sudden brightness was enough to make Suzuha flinch for an instant. Kagari was wearing a full-face helmet, and that made all the difference. She leapt towards Itaru just a moment before Suzuha. Kagari's black knife went up to his throat. Kagari spun around behind him, using Itaru's huge body as a shield. Suzuha staggered toward him, gritting her teeth. But Kagari remained silent as she headed outside the door with her hostage. And then, in the next moment, she shoved him forward. Itaru lost his balance and fell towards Suzuha. Suzuha fell to the ground underneath his weight. Itaru just barely managed to support himself with his arms and legs to keep from crushing her. Why, Kagari? Suzuha tried to shove him off using a little more force than she may have intended. But Itaru was so huge, it would take him a moment to get up. She was getting away. She somehow managed to crawl out from under him and quickly tried to fall after Kagari. Itaru was still lying on the ground as he tossed and naked Suzuha her shirt. She grabbed it and quickly put it on, then ran outside. But when she looked around the street, the girl in the motorcycle letters wasn't there. There was no way to even know where she'd gone. It would be dangerous to run around trying to find her now. There was a chance Itaru would be attacked while she wasn't at the lab. Itaru came outside as well. The bruises and wounds were bad enough, but the pain that ached in her heart was the worst of all. Why does it have to be like this?
小さくても勇敢で、マユ姉さんを守るためにいつも頑張ってて、私もそんなあの子にいろいろなことを教えた。きっと妹みたいに思ってた。けど、あいつはもう完全に敵だ。
Itaru straightened up her shirt sleeves.
今の鈴葉、なんかエロゲーの地上キャラっぽい格好になってる
え？お
Suzuha was caught completely off guard. True, her t-shirt only came down to just below her hips, roughly the length of a miniskirt. Her breasts were almost completely bared. The shirt's hem was turned up and she felt exposed.
まあ僕は地上物も結構いける口なんで、乱れた裸 T シャツというのもありといえばありですが、
またそうやってふざける。大怪我してたかもしれないのに。
But Itaru shook his head.
僕さっきはナイフ見て騒いじゃったけど、でも怖がる必要なかったんじゃないかなって。あれがもし僕の聞き間違いじゃなかったら。
Itaru rubbed the part of his neck where the knife blade was.
ナイフを突きつけられてた時、ほんの少しだけど聞こえたんだよ。
何が？
彼女、多分泣いてた。
え
Crying under that helmet? After that whole battle with Suzuha, while holding a knife to Itaru's neck? But why?
だからさ、決めつけるのはまだ早いんじゃね？
父さん。アイス買ってきてくれた？バニラ。
ああ、もちろん。
食べたいな。私ちょっと疲れちゃった。
And then she almost fell forward. Itaru managed to catch her before she hit the ground.
おい、鈴葉。
ごめん、平気。でも少しだけ休ませて。
That was all she had the energy to say. She closed her eyes in her dad's arms, and her consciousness melted away. Oh, why, Kagari? Why are you doing this? When July came, the sun shone down even harder on eastern Japan. Summer was truly there. The news had been saying for days that the heat island effect might make this the hottest summer in years. And then, on the first Sunday in July, I met with Maho in Akihabara. I was waiting at the open cafe at the UPX when Maho arrived. She was a little late.
久しぶり。
She ordered an iced coffee and took a deep breath.
と言っても いつもビデオチャットで顔は合わせてるが。
そうね。あまり久しぶりという感じはしないわ。
Her habit of paying no attention to her clothes or looks hadn't changed at all in the last 6 months. People were going to think she was an elementary school kid who decided to go play at a friend's house. But it would upset her if I said that, so I never would.
まさかこっちに来てるとは思わなかったよ。偶然レスキネン教授と会わなかったら今も知らないままだった。
落ち着いたら連絡するつもりだったのよ。クリスのことで定期的な連絡はいずれにせよしなければならないのだし。
今回は新型脳炎の研究だって。
レスキネン教授はね、私はその助手という立場だけど、どちらかというとアマデウス担当。何か不具合はない？と言ってもこれもいつも報告は受けているから大体の状況は分かっているつもりだけれど。
ああ、特に問題ない。最近はクリスの相手をするのに苦労してるけどな。
ちょっと。
I heard a voice from my smartphone, which I placed on the table.
苦労ってどういう意味？
I left the Amadeus app turned on. Of course, Kurisu could hear everything we said.
最初に会った頃よりちょっと口調がきつくなってきてる気がする。
あんたが勝手に私にビビってるだけでしょ？
かもな。
It was turning into our old relationship in the Alpha World line, where we fought all the time. I was starting to lose track of whether that was a good or bad thing for me. I thought I was trying to forget about Kurisu.
ヒアジョーさんは初めて会った時の方が口調はきつかったな。
あれは初対面の人には先輩はきついのよ。なぜかというと年相応に見てもらえないから。
The two of them spoke in unison.
だからついカリカリしちゃうのよ。ある程度親しくなれば容姿のことも言われなくなるでしょ。だから心穏やかに話せるというだけ。
I guess I was right not to comment on her outfit. That was a close call.
アマデウスの話に戻すけど、クリスの口調がきつくなったというのは面白い兆候だわ。私や教授の前では見せない一面なわけでしょ。それだけ深く心を開いているとも言えるかもしれない。開いてません。
I simply smiled and ignored
そ
her.
うした心の動きをプログラムとして解析できるから、私や教授と話しているだけでは決して見られなかった変化だわ。それだけで岡部さんにテストを続けてもらった価値もあるというものよ。
そんなものか。
レスキネン教授もその点を高く評価していたわ。過大評価だと思いますが、実際私と話す時も文句や愚痴が多いですし、あまり男らしくないというか。
Well, I knew my personality had gotten a bit negative, especially given what I'd been through. But did she really need to say that to Maho right now? An eye for an eye it is
ちな
then.
みに今まで報告していなかったことがあるんだが、
何かしら。
これはおそらくヒアジョーさんやレスキネン教授も把握していないことだと思う。
待って、あんた何の話をしようとしてるの？真帆先輩や教授が把握していないことって、私についての？
栗ご飯とカメハメハといえばわかるか？
A few weeks ago, I'd actually searched for Kurikohan in Kamehameha no Whim. It was the handle Kurisu had used on that channel when she was still alive. From what I'd seen, the comments started in summer of 2008, then abruptly stopped in July of 2010, and then started up again in December of that same year. Even now, in July 2011, they were still appearing. If it wasn't Kurisu's ghost, and it wasn't an imposter, then the one who could be writing those posts was...
岡部倫太郎さん、ちょっと二人だけで話をしましょうか。
やっぱりお前の仕業だったか。さすがに黙っているのはまずいんじゃないか。
真帆先輩に報告するなんてもっとまずいわよ。
なんで？
私がアートチャンネルを見てることが一言も教えてないからに決まってるでしょ。
堂々としていればいいじゃないか。アットチャンネルを見るのも書き込むのも別に犯罪じゃないんだし。そうだろ？アットチャンネルはクリス。
あんたね、次そういう呼び方したらあることないことアットちゃんに書き込んでやるわよ。
それこそ犯罪一歩手前の行為だろう。
I couldn't help but laugh. Conversations like this brought back so many memories. I used to be so full of myself that I tick off Kurisu all the time.
ねえ、一体何の話？
何でもありません。気にしないでください。海馬からきれいさっぱり今日の記憶をほうぶり去ってください。
隠していたっていつかはバレるぞ。
あんたはいいから黙りなさい。
やっぱりあなたたち半年前よりずっと仲良くなっているわね。
あ、先輩、すみません。
どうして謝るの？
いえ、せっかく岡部と真帆先輩久々に会ったのに私ばかり話してしまって。というわ
He's
けで、
definitely
あとはお二人にごゆっくりどうぞ。
別にそんなつもりで言ったんじゃないわよ。
それもこれも岡部が変なことを言い出したせいね。
そうなのか。栗ご飯とカメハメ派。
お願いだから言わないで。
Just like the real Kurisu, she was strangely obsessed with hiding the fact that she wasn't at Janelor.
ちょっと頭を冷やしたいので一度切りますね。失礼します。
Kurisu disappeared from the screen. Kurisu had been kind of rude lately, so it felt good to have a chance to get back at her. If I overdid it, she was probably going to hold a grudge, so this was likely a good place to stop.
栗ご飯って何なのよ。
どうしても知りたかったらクリスに聞いてくれ。
If I explained it, she'd probably get mad and refuse to talk to me again.
それで今回はどれぐらいの間こっちに滞在することになりそうなんだ。
前よりも長くなるかもしれないわね。レスキネン教授が研究している新型脳炎は未だに詳しいことがほとんど分かっていないようだから、もしかしたら私だけ先に帰らされる可能性もあるけど。
時間があったらラボにも顔を出してみるといい。ダルやマユリもきっと喜ぶはずだ。
マユリさんはともかく橋田さんはどうかしら。
Well, I was finally starting to understand Daru's true nature. Speaking of Daru, he should be on a date with Yuki and Mane right now.
ちなみにクリスのノート PC はその後どうしたの？
あれは破棄したよ。それが一番いい判断だったんだ。前にそう話しただろう。
ええ、そうね。
She looked down, a sad expression on her face. I told her I was going to do it ahead of time, but it still must have upset her to see one of the last things she had to remember Kurisu by destroyed.